Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Take Back My Brain. I'm your host, Laurie Hammer, and today I have a very special guest. I have with me Ashleigh Di Lello, and she's amazing. The first time I met Ashley, she is going to tell her story, but the first time I met her, she was in the midst of her health struggles, and now I've watched her over the years and just seen her healing progress and just what the Lord is doing in her life, and it's just been an amazing progress to follow. And she is the founder and creator of what's called bio-emotional healing. And so we're going to dive into that today. So, Ashley, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm really glad you're here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Fun to reconnect after, gosh, I
Yes.
think 5 years when we
It has been
originally
a
met.
while. Yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it was that long. And but a lot has happened in 5 years.
Yes, it certainly has.
Definitely. Definitely. So I want you to share your full story with my audience because it is absolutely incredible and the healing that's happened in your body.
Yeah, it's two I had two life-altering health experiences, which was incredibly hard. You think if you go through one and defy the odds and you're like,
Didn't
okay,
have to
we're
go through a second one.
did that check,
Mhm.
right? But it was the second one that led me to this work. So just to surmise, really like 35 years of history here. My first health journey started when I was 13 years old, which came out of nowhere. And what's important is to understand back then, the world was very different. We didn't have podcasts, social media, Google. We had no information that we could find in the way that we can today. Any type of alternative or holistic or functional medicine people were seen as very like voodoo.
Right.
It wasn't very mainstream. So definitely a very different world through my first health experience. Which made it that much more difficult.
Mhm.
But I was 13 years old. I was the epitome of health. I was dancing 5 hours a day. And then overnight, I was fighting for my life. Came out of nowhere. And the greatest challenge with it, as I'm sure a lot of your audience understands, is that no one could figure out what was wrong. I went
Right.
to all over the country, some of the top specialists and hospitals in this country. I was tested for about everything that even existed, right? We were grasping for straws. And in fact, I would pray for a positive test, right? Because then at
Mhm.
least
Right.
I know
You
what
have
we're
an answer.
facing, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because it's incredibly hard to be sick, fighting for your life, but then also going, well, what do we do? Because I don't know what's happening in my body.
Right.
So it was a double-edged sword again, as I know so many people understand. And I am, I'm 13 years old, and the doctor walks in at one of the top children hospitals in the country. And he says, you need to accept you're not going to live past your teenage years. All the tests were showing your body's fighting some rare viral infection,
Wow.
but my organs were shutting down, and I knew it. My hair was falling out. I was
Mhm.
down to about 90 pounds. My skin was yellow from my liver shutting down. I mean, I could feel my system shutting down piece by piece, day by day. But he sits down and tells me that this is what is happening and this is what I need to accept, and says, the sooner you come to peace with this, the easier it's going to be to accept your reality, right?
Mhm.
And as I'm sure so many listeners understand, I mean, this was this moment of every emotion you can even imagine, and also just
Sure.
disbelief and shock. Like, how is this my life?
Right.
Where did this come from? I was just super healthy. And now you're telling me at 13 years old, my life is over. And trying to just unravel all of this in my mind, I just knew one thing, that I didn't accept this was it. It was over. I just needed to go home and essentially die.
Right.
And we walked out of the hospital, my mother and I, and no idea what to do. Just feeling deep in my soul that if I just accepted I was dying, then any chance of survival was gone.
It's
Right.
gone. Yeah. And you knew that even back then.
Even back then, and I'm so grateful. There's 2 things that I think really helped me to come to that. Because yes, I meet 13-year-olds today and I'm like, "Oh my goodness,
Can't
I'm
believe you
not
had that. Yeah.
sure," right? Because it's
Uh-huh.
amazing what you rise to when you have to, but at 13, looking at this top expert doctor and telling him, "I don't accept this," right?
Right.
This is not my future that I'm just going to go home and say, "Okay, well, this is it." I think there's 2 things really that I credit. my faith in God. I just had this deeper belief on my heart that my life was meant for more than
Mhm.
these 13 years. And no evidence showed that that was possible, but deep in my soul, I felt like it was.
Yeah.
And the second was having such a love and passion for dance, that
Mm.
it just felt like it was something I was born to do. And although it had the double-edged sword of losing it for 6 years was like taking my soul,
Right.
it also was such a gift to have something I was so passionate about because I wanted to get back to life, but I was determined to dance again.
Yeah.
Right. And I think those two things really drove me to not just say, okay, right. I know I'm facing a mountain and I have no idea what we're even facing, but we're going to figure it out. And this really was the introduction of how powerfully I started to see in my own life that intricate mind body connection, how powerful the brain is in communicating to the body. And of
Yeah.
course, the body back to the brain, because I was so sick. I had nights I was afraid to go to sleep.
Oh,
I
yeah.
truly felt like if I surrendered that conscious will to live, that my body wouldn't make it through the night because I was
Wow.
so sick. I could hardly lift a finger or speak some days.
Mhm.
And so I would will myself to stay awake and will my body to keep fighting. And this is when I really started to witness how powerful that connection is. I didn't understand
Right.
it the way I do today, but these were the first roots. So it was a long journey. With lots of pieces, but it really was the beginning of me loving the brain. And
Mhm.
what we essentially did, because everyone wants to know, well, what is it? Till to this day, there's a lot of components, but this rare viral infection, I don't know. I don't know, still to this day. So all we did is go down this route of giving my immune system every possible avenue of support, which we
Mhm.
have way more biohacking and all the
Right?
tools today.
Right.
But back then, with what I ate and the supplements and homeopathic medicine and nutrition, all the things, and then of course my mindset, slowly but surely I started to recover. It was a long journey. I fought between life and death for 4 years
Wow.
and it took 6 for me to have the strength to go back to dance again. So my teenage years were not the carefree fun years.
Right, right. But you did go back to dance and were very
Mhm.
successful.
I
I mean, you
did.
definitely defied all those odds and you like, kick the devil in the face like, "Hey, you meant to destroy me. Look at me now."
It was miraculous. It
Mhm.
was miraculous. I was a competitive ballroom dancer, which is like gymnastics. We compete, and people know it from Dancing with the Stars. But
Yeah.
uh, got came back in college and ranked in the top 12 in the United States. And then my husband, who was also a ballroom dancer, we competed against each other. Didn't plan on making it a profession, but we got married, and then had incredible opportunities. We traveled all over the world and performed. We did So You Think You Can Dance,
Mhm.
Dancing with the Stars, Broadway, which was just incredible. On the So You Think
Wow.
You Can Dance, we were dancing like 12 hours a day near the end because we both went to the finale. And then Broadway doing 8 shows a week was just this miracle. Like, here I am,
Yeah.
I'm at the top of the mountain. I
Mhm.
defied the odds, and I'd suffered a lot of injuries in my professional career too. So it just felt like this overcoming, but look at my
Right.
body. And here we are. We're at the top of our career. And we have a 2-year-old daughter, which she
Mhm.
was traveling with us. And she was also a miracle because they said I'd never have children. So it really
Right.
felt like pinch me moments all the time of like, wow, I made it. And then I needed to have a second hip surgery. That's the ramifications of using your body so aggressively.
Right?
But I thought, you know what? My first hip surgery, I was back dancing in my career 8 months later. We'll do it again. And it did not go that way. The surgery failed. Something went very wrong and it launched my whole body into chronic pain. I lost the ability to walk. The nerve pain spread throughout my whole body, the dysfunction. I could hardly hold a book now. I had a 2
Right.
year old daughter I couldn't even carry, couldn't kneel on the floor to play with. Of course, I lost my professional career. I also was a personal trainer because I loved how the capacity of the body to get strong again because that
Right.
was my avenue. So I had a fitness app, which I also lost the capacity to continue because I couldn't add any new content. And it was like deja vu,
Right.
except for now I'm a mother, I'm a business owner,
Mhm.
I'm married. And it was just this snowball of my body just, it seemed like every week having new pain, and then sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night, of course, brings up all these health
Right,
issues because my
right,
body's in fight or flight 24/7, in unrelenting nerve pain. I mean, if you bumped me, it felt like a truck ran me over.
right.
It was so violent. My nerves were on fire. I could take the strongest medication that even existed and it didn't do anything. And so it was, as hard as it was to fight for my life, this was harder, which
Yeah,
I would never even expect because it was living in unrelenting hell like 24 hours a
24 hours a
day
day. Yeah.
and with all the responsibilities. So, I was like, okay, here we go again. I know what to do, and I mean, everything, right? Western, Eastern, alternative, regenerative, functional, like everything
We're doing it
holistic. My,
all.
my,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
diet was on par, all the supplements, all the anti-inflammatory, the cold plunges, the infrared sauna, the PMF mats,
right,
the,
right.
like whatever you
Like,
can
you were
think
doing
of.
it. Like, if
I
you
was
was out there, you were doing it.
I was doing it.
Yeah.
Exactly. I did over 200 type of injections, all the stem
Oh,
cell and
yeah.
prolotherapy and
Mhm.
PRP. Like, we're going to do it. And of course, then because we're doing it through these years, because I wasn't getting well,
Right,
we're at the brink of like losing our home because we're spending
right.
everything we have trying to get me well. And my husband's trying to balance. I mean, we lost our professional career, but teach all these other things, and
Yeah,
I'm feeling all this overwhelm because it's not just my life, it's my husband's life, it's my daughter's life. And one night I really just got to the end of my rope because we had tried everything.
right.
And it was probably one of the scariest moments of my life. And I've had a lot of those, but I looked at my husband and I'm like, I don't know what, there's nothing left. Like there's literally no treatments left. And that night, I remember just because my brain was just going, like, what do I do?
Right.
And I've done
Yeah,
all these things. I've put forth every effort and I'm getting worse, just like the doctor said, and I was diagnosed with all these chronic pain conditions, which is like a life sentence, right?
right.
This is the best you can do is just manage it. But I was told as well, like, it's only going to get worse. You
Mhm.
know, so what a future, right? That's now
Right.
painted for
Thank
me.
you. Thank you for that
Where death
encouragement.
almost felt like a
It
release,
was an
right?
option.
Instead of, yeah,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
here's the rest of your life just in living in hell,
Right,
good luck.
right,
And that night, I remember just thinking, I can't keep, I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. And my family, and
right.
I'm scared to death. There's nothing left. And it was probably the closest I've ever felt to literally like, God, you can take me.
Yeah.
You know, and that scared me so deeply because I was someone who had literally refused to die
Mhm.
for 4 years. Like if I'd wanted
Right,
to, I could have said, "Okay, body." And I know it was so sick, it would have been like, "Thank you." You know?
mhm.
And so for me to get to that place,
Right,
I suddenly felt this just unbelievable empathy as well for people suffering and getting to that place themselves, right? Not to do anything
right.
to harm them, but to really be like, God, this is too hard, and it's too
Yeah.
hard on the people I love, and we don't know what to do. And that scared me to feel that way. And so I remember just sitting in that truth of what does it mean to give up and just live like this the rest of my life. And I'm not okay with that, right? And even 13-year-old Ashley was like, well, I'm not okay with that. We've defied the odds. We are not
Right,
going to give up. And so that night I just kept thinking and I was going over everything and I'm like, well, what is the common thread is that all these doctors and practitioners have told me, well, your nervous system flipped a switch into pain. And I'm like, I'm going to figure out how to flip it back,
right,
right? If it can
right.
flip one way, it's got to
You
be
can
able to flip the
flip
other
another,
way. And
right?
that's where I dove into neuroscience and pain science and 5+ hours a day. That's what I studied with this
Mhm.
purpose and understanding of how do I change this. And that's when I realized it's not just that I have to rewire these pain pathways, but our nervous system is so impacted by every experience in our life. And for myself, that hip surgery did fail. They left a hole in my hip. But the violent way in which my body responded to that wasn't just being driven by that surgery. It was
Right,
its deep and traumatic memory of all those years fighting for my life. And so when that happened, my nervous system just went into fight or flight in overdrive for
right,
a pure need of survival. Hey, we fought before and survived. we're going to go in fight or flight full throttle, which then created way more pain, took the dysfunction and pain I had and just magnified it. And that's when I realized it's not just healing now, it's healing the impact of my nervous system from my illness as a
So,
teenager and other events in my life in order to not have these constant alarm bells between my brain and my body.
right.
And then how do you do that? And I had all these different modalities, and I thought there needs to be a process to really take all these things into account, step by step, to really build trust again between the brain and the body. And that's when I created bioemotional healing, and I was my own guinea pig, and
Mhm.
it saved my life. And then
Right.
I knew that was my mission and purpose, and I've been, coaching clients through it for almost 6 years now.
Oh, it's so beautiful, Ashley. So beautiful. And my listeners know I'm always talking about brain first, right? And so when I do amino acid therapy, we have to balance the brain first. We have to fix the deficiency. And then you can deal with, all the things that you're talking about too, right? So we have to establish that connection in the body and love on the brain.
Mhm.
Because if we don't, then we end up in these chronic situations. And, you're such a living testimony of that. Um, I would love for you to dive more into what does it look like to use this bioemotional healing? What does that do?
Yeah. And I love you said brain first, because when it when it comes to the body,
Hmm.
right? We've all been so conditioned, and I'm not discounting this, obviously. We
Yeah.
have to treat the body, but the command center of the body is the brain, and the
Right.
brain is the thing we leave out,
Which
and
doesn't
it's
make any sense. Like we just feel like neck down, we'll
yeah.
just deal with the neck down. Like this is fine.
Exactly.
And
Or
it's
we just
not.
look at the brain in terms of, unless you have a brain disease, brain cancer, brain tumor, like a pure brain diagnosis, right? Or
Yes.
a mental emotional health, then we'll look at the brain. But we totally separate the body when we know there's a constant feedback loop between the two. But you can treat the body, as I did, as I'm sure so many of listeners you have had and people you've worked with, you can
Yes.
treat the body all day long. You can have everything in alignment. But if the brain isn't working right, and if the nervous system is stuck in this survival mechanisms that
Yeah.
those alarm bells are running all of the time, you
Yep.
can never treat the body enough to override those
No.
alarm bells that are happening.
Yes. Right. And you can't medicate. I always say you can't medicate away a nutritional deficiency, right? You also can't medicate away alarm bells,
Nope,
right?
you
You can
can't.
try to, close them so you can't hear them, but they're still there, right? And
Right.
so it's so important the work that you're doing. And I know you're not saying this is the end all be all either, because, obviously there's a nutrition piece, there's all these
Of
things, but
course.
what you're doing for most people is the missing piece.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
then it takes what you're doing and anyone else
Yes.
and allows it to have full impact. Because
Totally.
now the brain and body are aligned for healing, where so much you're trying to balance the body and the brain chemical, but your nervous system is still saying alarm, alarm, alarm,
Mhm.
alarm, alarm.
Yep.
And then you're in your sympathetic nervous system, which is draining your resources every day. So you're just like kind of trying to not drown. So you're treading water, which we know gets so defeating because you put
Exhausting.
forth all these efforts, you invest all this money, and you're like, why am I not progressing?
Yeah.
And that's where I really had to realize. So let's talk about this, because it was hard. Listen, I was a fighter,
Mhm.
right? I survived. I It was hard for me to go, oh my gosh, no matter how tough and determined I was, my nervous system was altered by
Right.
my illness. And I
Yeah.
mean, how could it not? But it's hard. All of us have to do that, right? We fight through things in our life, challenges that we go through
Yeah.
in childhood, in relationships, other traumas, struggles, work, and we fight to survive them. And then it's really hard to go then, wait, there's been an impact and an alteration at a neurological level that
Mhm.
now I've got to go and look at. And that's kind of hard. I was kind of ticked. I was like, wait, I already went
Right.
through all of
Right. I
this.
already did all this work. So
You're telling me I can't heal my body this time with all the things I did before. I have to fundamentally heal my nervous system,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I was ticked a little bit at first, like, God, okay, how much can you ask? But
Yep.
then I was incredibly empowered
Yeah.
because I thought, I am missing this. This is the missing piece.
Yeah.
This sets me up to not only heal my body now, but lasting health because I'm
That's what
finally
we
going
want.
to
Mhm.
address these deep alarm systems that are running without my consent, but they're running based on their memory of my life.
Right?
So
Yeah.
something important for people to remember and kind of the premise of this is anything in our life that alters us. Like there's clearly traumatic experiences, right? But trauma is anything that alters the brain to a place where
Yeah.
you now think differently, you feel differently, you see the world differently. So for me, I had this deep fundamental mistrust with
Mm.
my body, right? Even though in one way I trusted it. Look what we overcame. Look at my
Right.
career. But my illness and then all these injuries and all these surgeries, I had this deep fundamental mistrust where I was kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop, which
Right.
I believe was a huge contributor to my injuries, right?
Mhm.
Because there was this stress response that was running. So, and that's not conscious. That's
No, it's definitely
subconscious,
subconscious.
right? So I had no idea this was what was happening. I just knew I could kind of feel this stress response running in my body all the time. Just
Yep.
kind of this awareness of, okay, what's next? And there was kind of this hypervigilance of monitoring
Mhm.
symptoms in my body. And then my brain going, what is that? What is that? And that's some of that PTSD that comes from being healthy and then being so sick, and you no longer are ignorant. And then we're kind of trained to constantly monitor what's happening in our body, and it creates this hypervigilance
Yes.
where the brain is constantly on alert. Ooh, what is that? What's that sensation? What's that? And we live in these mortal bodies. So it takes just normal sensations that might go away and it amplifies them, right? It creates
Yeah.
a threat response. Now the brain's sending more stress hormones, and you might take something that would go away in a few days and now it's staying because the brain
Mhm.
is hyper focused on it. And so, in understanding that our limbic system, which is that data bank of everything in our life that we've gone through that has hurt us, that has altered us, it doesn't have a time clock, right? So it has no sense of that was then and this is now. It is
No. Mhm.
constantly cross-referencing present day to our past. And based on what has happened in our past, it's then creating false alarm bells that it's projecting onto the present. And it doesn't just turn off, right? Like I remember having conversations with my brain where I'm like, it's okay. We're not dying now. And it's like, oh,
Right.
but what about this? And remember this and remember this and remember this. Because to my brain, what you have to understand as well, the things we survive, the brain is like, oh, I did a great job. Let's
Mhm.
stay in survival, right?
Right.
Because look, you
Yep.
defied the odds. You made
Yep.
it. Survival equals safety. So
Mhm.
I'm just going to stay there. And that comes out in health issues, that comes out in anxiety, in
Yep.
depression.
Yep.
It's all based on you and your biodiversity and your life experiences. So some people get crippling anxiety. I got crippling pain, right? It
Mhm.
depends on the person, but the nervous system is the driver of it all.
Right.
And what I had to realize, and just so that their listeners can maybe see themselves in this, is my nervous system fundamentally was like, listen, in order to survive this life, we have to stay in the sympathetic nervous system. We got to
Right.
keep fighting and we will not be taken off guard again. Now it's been twice, right? So
Right.
now it's like I've turned that on. I am
Mhm.
done. There's no rest. We
Yeah.
have to be on alert for the next threat because look now, it's happened twice,
Yeah.
right? And those mechanisms don't just surrender. You cannot take a pill. You can do temporary modalities that regulate your nervous system, right? So temporarily, you can go do breath work. That helps. You can go do a sauna, a cold plunge. You can go
Yep.
ground in the earth. But those are all temporary to where then the brain goes, okay, we're done now. I'm defaulting back because
Right.
fundamentally, we're not safe. We've got to stay alert. And that's where those things are good. I'm not discounting them. I do many of them. But
Yes.
what
Me
I
too.
wanted to do is fundamentally rewire my nervous
Right.
system.
Right.
So address all the physical, psychological, emotional components, unresolved emotions, unresolved fears, There was also impacts with personal relationships like my father, and it wasn't just my health, right? It was
Right.
all, your brain takes everything into account when
Yeah.
deciding how to protect you and how much protection you need, which is
Mhm.
why people who haven't had a lot of challenges, they're like, just be positive, and say positive things, and just that works, right? But someone whose brain has deeply been altered is like, great, thank you. I'm going to keep doing this,
Mhm.
and that's where I just want people to know it's not just that you're damaged or broken or not positive enough or not anything enough. It truly is your nervous system has decided it's got to take over. And
Right.
your brain thinks this is what's necessary to keep you alive, which is all that it cares about, right?
Right. Oh,
And
yeah.
to keep you alive emotionally. And that's important because the brain doesn't really differentiate. It cares
No.
just as much about your physical survival as your
Mhm.
emotional survival. So people who've gone through tremendous emotional trauma can get chronic pain later in life
Yes.
because that's how it's manifesting, because the body's been carrying all of that impact. So there's no one way in which this looks like. And that's what I just want to show forth, because that's why so many people also get married, have children. The stress goes up, and all of a sudden they have anxiety for the first time in
Right.
their life.
You're like, "What the heck just happened?"
Yeah.
Life is beautiful. I love my husband. I love my kids. Life is, but I have this pain. I have this anxiety, and I don't want it anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what we're really good, all of us, but especially women, is the shame and the guilt.
Oh,
What's wrong
yes.
with me? Why can't I just be happy? Why am I struggling with this? And I I just want people to understand from a neuroscience perspective, that sense of shame and guilt, which I used to be fantastic at. Okay. Do
I
not get me
understand.
wrong. Right.
Mhm. Yes.
A recovering perfectionist
Yes.
here, which I realized I couldn't heal my nervous system without also healing that. And
Letting that go.
yet,
Mhm.
I just want to challenge you to always question, why is being a perfectionist so important to my
Important.
brain?
Right.
Right. And again, for my brain, it was, we have to be perfect to survive.
Right.
So that translated into every other area of my life. I went to college and I cried when I got an A minus, an A minus. I felt like a failure. And I remember consciously being like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand then, deep in my brain was perfectionism equals survival. So an A minus, even though on the surface is
Mhm.
not threatening my survival, it was threatening perfectionism, which was linked to my survival, which
Mhm.
is why that mechanism was so powerful. So if you're listening, as so many women are, and I will tell you, it is one of the most common thread amongst all of my clients,
Yes.
whether they're coming to me for emotional or physical challenges, is this need to be perfect
Yeah.
and this harsh self criticism that goes right alongside it. And I
Mhm.
just want you to ask, like, there is some deep need from the experiences in your life that are driving that. It's not just because you're a high achiever, which I am, but if you're having a hard time changing that, that's just a question to ask. And that's what I needed to understand, but it can't be healed with shame or guilt, because shame and guilt actually activate the alarm bells in the brain
Mhm.
and send stress hormones to the body. And in fact, close off the neural synapses where information is exchanged and where our brain can actually learn and change.
Right.
So, from a pure neuroscience perspective, we cannot heal and we cannot have lasting change through shaming and guilting and harsh self
Right.
criticism,
Right.
right?
You're stuck on this hamster wheel when you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's just important to know, because we all want to change it, but I hope that is a
Right.
greater motivator of
Yeah.
understanding compassion and grace has to be learned and has to be practiced, and that's a huge part of healing the nervous system. And I know it won't happen overnight, but that's a window into one of the most important pieces, right? That
Right.
I work through with clients. But essentially, the process, which is 12 weeks long, is first to identify, right, all the pieces in your life, emotional, psychological, social, that have had an impact on your
Mhm.
nervous system. And even if you think you've dealt with it, right, there's usually a lot of unresolved pieces
Correct.
that we've got to look at first, and partner with the brain and nervous system to create safety, that they can heal these pieces and let go of some of these survival mechanisms that have been linked to your survival thus far, right? What once allowed us to survive is now usually our prison and the
Mm,
predictor and perpetuator of our challenges.
yep.
But like we said, the brain isn't apt to just let those go. So we have to first partner with it in a very purposeful, progressive way to
Mhm.
where your brain accepts, I
Mm,
can let this go.
yeah.
I'm notwithstanding my history, which I have a data bank that I can recall in a second.
Right?
That was then. Okay, this is now,
Mhm.
right? I can access those survival mechanisms if I need to, but I don't have to live there every day
Right?
to be okay. Once we get the brain on board to do that, now we're open to actually rewire a new program. But that new program we desire to live will not take root until we have first gotten the brain to a place of safety where the nervous system can switch and go,
Mm, mhm.
okay, I have this memory, but it's different now. Then it's in this place of receptivity to what the latter part of the program is really starting to rewire those new neural pathways, that new program of health and confidence and love and safety and trust and all of those pieces necessary to heal our mind or our body. And what I have seen and why I'm so passionate about this is you hear my story, and there's lots of amazing stories, but we're always good at saying, well, that's them.
Mhm.
This is me. And why I love the brain so much is that it has nothing to do with talent or intellect or personality.
Right?
It is the functionalities are the same for all of us, which is why I'm so passionate for people to understand they're just as powerful, they're just as capable, and they can have just the same results in their life, notwithstanding what they're facing, because it's it's access to us. We just have to have the process and the way to do that. So
Right?
I'm not the exception to defying the odds. And it's a journey, but it's possible. And I've seen it for the past 6 years now.
Right. And you give the brain what it needs and it will heal, right?
Yeah.
That's, and no matter what's happened to you, whether it's chemical, physical, emotional, we all know that when you give the body, we give the brain what it needs, it it moves beyond our capacity to really even comprehend. There is so much healing available. There's so much growth available. We used to think that once the brain was damaged, it was always damaged, and that's
Yes.
definitely not true. So, when you talk about rewiring and moving past whatever trauma there is, all those kind of things, it's completely possible. And then that affects everything from head to toe because the brain is controls everything. We're top down.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you don't fix the brain, then it's really hard to fix the gut. It's really hard to fix the hormones because you are stuck, as you're talking, Ashley, in this overdrive system, in that like your internal alarms are constantly going off. And until we calm all of that down, really deep root cause healing, can't happen because the root cause really, I believe, and I know you believe, really begins in the brain and ends in the brain. It begins and ends there.
Absolutely. And it's not fixed, and we know it can change until the day that we die. And so
Yeah.
it's twofold, right? The brain is incredibly adaptive
Yes.
and it's very plastic, right? You hear the word neuroplasticity, and that's really just the brain's ability to change in response to experiences, learn new ways of thinking, moving, seeing, and that is such a beautiful mechanism that allows us to change, to become experts, to develop skill and mastery. But the flip side of neuroplasticity is it also allows us to get stuck in
Right.
chronic cycles of health or mental and emotional challenges, right? Which is why this is the piece doctors are missing. There's a reason why things get worse over time. It's
Hmm.
not just this is your sentence, it will get worse. It's, well, the brain is learning this, and the
Yep.
brain is learning this way to communicate to the body, whether it is through anxiety or pain or gut issues. Those neural connections are getting stronger. When the longer you're stuck in it, the more it's practicing, the
Yep.
more it's adapting, which is why, notwithstanding your attempt to treat the body, if you do not treat the brain and how it has now been altered by what it has adapted to and learned and gotten better at, that's why so many conditions become chronic, and I just hate that. I
I
hate
know, me
it.
too.
I was told so many things. This is chronic, 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 which is so defeating. Even they've scanned the brain of people who receive chronic diagnoses. And in some ways, it can be more altering on the brain than a cancer diagnosis because you're being told this is it. This is the rest of your life. You are now these chronic conditions. You can maybe manage them where hopefully, it's still awful, but with a lot of cancers, there's hope to get beyond it, right? But the reason why so many become chronic is not because the body's doomed and now will just forever break down. It's because we're not addressing the brain.
Yep.
And so the brain has learned it. The body can heal. The body can actually be
Yes.
healed. Your gut lining can be reestablished. Your injury can heal. Your inflammation can be gone. And yet you have all the same symptoms because of those neural pathways the brain has learned and become an expert at in
Mm-hmm.
communicating to the body. And that's why yes, we have to treat the body. But the missing piece is the brain.
Is the brain.
Yeah.
100% of the time. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Love
Let's, if we can just get that, we could eradicate and heal so many things that we've been told we can't heal, and if we look at that, we're living in more stress than ever.
it. Mm-hmm.
Um, and we have more health issues than ever. And I'm not discounting toxicity and food and chemicals and mold and all the things, right? I understand that
Those,
exists.
those pieces, and we have to address those as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. But if your brain is stuck in stress,
Mm-hmm.
your propensity to be able to handle what we're exposed to is diminished, which is why it is a snowball
Yeah.
effect. But
Yeah.
when your brain is healed, when your nervous system cannot operate in fight or flight all the time, we have amazing capacity and resources in our body to heal and yes, handle life, handle what we're thrown at, and then everything you do to treat the body
Yeah.
is just exponentially magnified because you're not draining all your resources from the inside.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I was just reading a bunch on, beta, alpha, theta waves, all those kind of things, and your deepest healing happens in the theta, state. And what you're talking about is just allowing your body to actually have that experience, to
Mm,
allow that state, that those brain waves to really slow down and to be okay, because that's where creativity happens. That's where healing happens. That's where, all this beauty that God created in our bodies, that's where it happens. And so your message is completely, so on point. And the work that you're doing, I was just reminded of a client not too long ago, and she's just been struggling with, gut issues for years, and we had an appointment, and I'm like, asking questions, because you get a lot of, most of it's emotional, right? So you
mm,
just get a lot of this, and she's like, I'm just tired of fighting. And
mhm,
she's just, I'm fighting, and you're talking about being stuck, and it's just this fight all the time. I said, why do you feel like you're fighting? She goes, because everything's a fight, you
mhm.
know? And so that's just such, maybe all of us don't verbalize that, but we're stuck in a fight, a
Mhm.
fight for your life, or a fight for our family, or a fight for our gut health, or a fight with this hormone. Like, we're constantly trying to fight things, and our body doesn't, it'll survive in a fight, but it's not designed to be in a fight. We're
Mm.
designed to live in victory. We're
Yep.
designed to walk, because the word of God says, every place we walk, he has gone before us and he will give us victory. But we're in this fight. We still have to take the territory, right?
Mm, mhm.
But we've gotten caught up in, like, we're the ones responsible for fighting, all these battles, instead of just walking in the power that our body has, our brain, our mind, our soul, our spirit have. And I just want to thank you for making such an awareness of that.
Oh, yeah. It was a journey. I had to be totally broken down and desperate to meet my determination. And, just within that as well, faith helped save my life. But also at the same time, had a fundamental deep faith and trust in God, and I also had a mistrust because I
I
felt like it was
understand.
up to
Mm,
me
yeah.
to defy the odds.
Mhm.
And that was part of my fight or flight response
Yeah.
because as much as I trusted him, I also took it all upon my shoulders,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Um, and he, again, that happens when your life has given your brain enough evidence of that necessity, you know?
Right.
So I couldn't access that even as a professional dancer who could stretch all day long. You could see me doing yoga and I would look relaxed.
Uh-huh.
I could not fundamentally relax. I could feel this internal buzzing system
Yeah.
that even inhibited me from getting deep breath. Like the breath work I'm able to do today, I could not once access, notwithstanding
Mhm.
how my environment, nothing. And it was so weird because I didn't understand then. I remember even saying to my husband, we were watching a movie, and I said, I look totally relaxed, right? Like I'm just sitting here, we're watching a movie. And he's like, yeah, of course. What do you mean? I'm like, this buzzing inside it just won't turn off.
Mhm.
There was this fundamental wiring that it is not safe to let your guard down. It
Right.
is not safe to let go and trust. We have to stay in this hypervigilance. I've got you. The next shoe is going to drop. We will fight through it. We will overcome it. Through my career, I had career-ending injuries. I mean, it's a
Right.
journey that I overcame. I tried to sing and I got vocal nodules and lost my singing voice. So
Wow.
like there was a lot of evidence of you will fight to live, you will
Right.
fight to do what you love, you will fight, all the pieces in our life, financially, spiritually,
Mhm.
relationship,
Mhm.
career, like, and that fight response, which again is beautiful mechanism. Like
Right.
the fight or flight system also gets a bad rap. It is beautiful. It is why we can defy the odds. It's how athletes access it. Every time I was on stage, I accessed it to be able to harness that capacity. It's why moms can do amazing things when their child's in danger. Like it's a beautiful mechanism that we want to be able to access and then
Mhm.
come out of.
Right.
Access and come out of. But so many of us who get stuck in prolonged emotional, mental, and physical challenges, your nervous system has flipped into staying there and
Right.
it feels
Right.
validated. And the longer it goes, the more validated it is.
Mhm.
And so I just want people to know it's not just you because they're like, I'm doing the cold plunge, I'm doing blah, 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 blah. Right? It's like
Right. I did
we
it
have
all.
to fundamentally partner with the nervous system to
Yeah.
get it to a place to feel safe, to let go, to actually start to trust that you don't have to fight to be successful.
Right.
You don't have to fight to have love. You don't have to fight nonstop to have safety and trust, but that there is a birthright of also love and health and trust and abundance. And it doesn't only have to be fought for, right?
Right.
But that certainly just doesn't happen. And it was a long journey for me to get there and then to stay here. Because that's the other piece. A lot of people can feel better for a time, but because of that deep wiring that really hasn't been rewired, healed, let go of, we'll come back. We'll come back to those mechanisms that the nervous system has deemed as safe. And that's why it becomes this vicious cycle with both chronic health conditions and emotional mental challenges, right? My anxiety was better for a time, but now it's like I'm back where I was, right? How many times have we all said that? But when you heal the nervous system, you can stay.
You can stay.
And that's
Yep.
what we want, right? We
Yeah.
we we don't have to just struggle and survive our whole life.
No.
We can actually experience good and it feels foreign. It really does. It's like, wait,
What do we
this
do
is
with
good.
this?
Wait, can this be my
Yeah.
life too? And it really is a weird thing to not trust good,
Yeah.
you know? And that's where you just can recognize why that's so important to heal because we won't be able to stay in the good if our nervous system doesn't trust that it's safe to.
Exactly. I remember my first exposure to what I do, amino acid therapy and stuff, was when I was deep into my eating disorder. And so we had worked on it and it was an outpatient program. And I remember standing by the dock in San Francisco and I just started bawling. And, my fiance at the time, he's like, what is wrong? Because my brain felt a relief and a balance that I don't think I had ever felt before.
Mm,
And I'm like, I don't know how to process this, and I don't know how to live without the chaos and the
mm,
eating disorder and, everything, because that was my protective mechanism, right? You
mhm,
talk about that's how we protect ourselves. I don't know how to live without that. And
mhm.
so I love how you're talking about it takes time to learn, unlearn, relearn, whatever you want to say, how to look at life differently and how to respond so that you're not in that chaos, so that you're not in that fight or flight response all the time, because we get stuck there. And
Absolutely.
it's very foreign because we like what's comfortable. And sometimes trauma, fight or flight, fighting all the time is comfortable because that's where we've been for so long.
Yeah,
And
it's even if we don't want it, it's what the brain
oh,
seeks because it's
yeah,
familiar and predictable. And familiarity and predictableness is safe to the brain, right?
mhm,
So that's why it seeks the hell it always knows. I can
exactly.
predict it. I'm familiar with it. I've survived it before.
Right?
When we're in new, even if it's the very thing we desire,
Right.
brain's like, I don't know what this looks like. Can
Mhm.
I haven't survived this before. So let's go back to what I've survived, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's why it's so important. And you're right, it does take time. And it's just like with what you do or other people, when you have the right mechanisms,
Yes.
it doesn't have to take as long as we've been told, right?
Exactly.
And that's the other thing I want to say, because I also think we have this healing is hard, you
Right.
know,
It's gonna take
and
forever. And
yes,
yes.
it can.
Yeah.
But when we have the right tools, and that's what I've seen, like, okay, we're here for the long run, but also when we have this process, a proven process that partners with the brain and nervous system, man, I've seen incredible life-altering changes, freedom in 12 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and it takes their effort. Do not get me wrong, right? A client has to be ready to do the work because I can't do it for them. I don't live in their mind and body. But when they do that and they have a process, changes can also happen fast,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And I think that's just as important because I certainly had that mentality. It's going to take forever and it's forever. And I've had clients who've spent a long time trying to heal. And
Yes.
then when we address this, it's like everything comes online
Right.
and they feel different fundamentally, not because they're trying, but because that's now what is becoming part of their program.
Inspiring.
I want
Yeah.
to throw that out there too, right? Because I think we get overwhelmed with the time frame. We're exhausted. And
Yeah.
I've been there myself, but I want you to know, as I'm sure you've experienced with your clients, when you have the right tools process,
Yeah.
it's amazing what can also happen
Yes.
in a shorter time frame.
Yeah. And and don't negate what you've already done. Right. And so
Absolutely.
don't feel guilty, don't feel bad. Like you maybe needed to go through all of that to get to where you are. You prepped your body and now you're ready for this next stage. Um, so never despise, where you've been. Just always just keep moving forward.
Right. The only power is in the present.
Yes.
Listen, the amount
Yes.
of times I'd be like, oh my gosh, that was the wrong decision. Why'd I do that? Why'd I do that? Or I do a treatment, it'd make me worse. Right.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh my gosh, and we spent all that money. Now I'm worse. And now I've got to do all these other treatments to get back to where I
Right.
was. Like it is,
Literally.
we've all been there,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
there's no power in trying to go back and change what has already happened. It's just in the present and it all can be learning. And it's just what we do now, moving forward. And I certainly felt like, man, I wish I had known by emotional healing way back then. And, of
Right.
course, but then eh, I'm here now. So what do
Right.
I do now?
What do I do now and how do I move forward and how do I help people? So, and that's exactly what you've done. It's beautiful. Yeah.
I'm
Do you have any
grateful.
last parting words you want to share?
I if people are I hope people are feeling hope.
Mhm.
Um and if they're feeling overwhelmed, one thing obviously because it's just this interview, I have a free brain body blueprint that is a three-step process to help disrupting those pattern stress responses. Cause I know, especially when it comes to rewiring the nervous system, it's like very overwhelming, right? The body can be that way too. Oh my gosh, a million things you can do. So let's also simplify because if you're already in fight or flight, you're already overwhelmed.
Right.
Right. So this would be a great asset to start. It's free. And I promise you, it is incredibly thorough because we also don't utilize free resources, right?
Right,
So
right.
I want to refer people to that, to go and just do not underestimate the power and capacity of working with your brain and doing things even a little different. That's the other part that's so beautiful about the brain is anytime we do something even a little different, it changes. The
Right.
brain was designed to also change. It's just it takes our conscious control and redirection to allow that to happen, because if not, the brain will default to what it knows. It just does that. It wants to do as many things reflexively as possible. Think about it. It's controlling the whole body. It
Yep.
wants to energy conserve. So all the things it's already done, that's what it wants to do, because it doesn't have to divert any new energy or resources to do it, right? So it takes our conscious control. But when we can do that, the brain learns. We create new neural pathways. It's really incredible, and we've witnessed it live. The way we can functionally map the brain now, it's just really incredible to see the brain create new connections. And so I just want people to know they're not beyond hope. My oldest client to date was 84.
They love it.
84. Okay.
Mhm.
She had some strong neural pathways. Okay.
Mhm.
And a lot of trauma and challenges. Like that's a long time, and
Yeah.
even she wasn't beyond change,
Mhm.
because we all feel sometimes I've been stuck too long. I'm just so broken and damaged. I've seen to the depths of health, to the depths of emotional mental challenges. We are not fixed. We are not stuck. We are not our diagnosis. We were all created powerful, and it's just finding those right things that
Mhm.
align. And I can tell you, if you've been doing all the things, the nervous system is the missing piece, and not just to regulate it. Okay. There's a lot out there to regulate your nervous system. It's to fundamentally rewire it out of the patterns it's gotten stuck in. And then you can regulate it as needed, because life is life and life brings
Right.
stresses.
Yep.
Okay. And we all need to help regulate. Okay. But you can fundamentally change those patterns inside you that are the operating system. And that is the greatest hope
Mhm.
that exists, that none of us are beyond that capacity. We really aren't. Like God made all of us powerful, and the brain is this just incredible mechanism that we were all given. Yes, there's a few people who have true brain illness to where the parts of the brain aren't working, and if you have brain injury and parts of the brain are damaged, then yes, there are some certain components where limitations exist.
Yeah.
But aside from that, we were all made powerfully to be able to change. And
Yep.
you are not beyond hope. I can promise you that. I have been there where I have thought, how in the world will I ever feel differently in my body, in my life? I have felt hopeless. I have felt defeated. I have felt like I wasn't enough. I have felt like God was asking way too much. I have felt all of the above many times. So
Yeah.
don't under like people who have been to the other side, they were there too. And one day, one step at a time, heal your brain and nervous system. And it's amazing then what can happen.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Ashley, thank you so much for sharing your story, your passion, your method, and all
Yeah.
these things. So it's
That other piece I did want to throw out. If someone is like, this is what I need to do.
yeah,
I've balanced my brain, my amino acid, like
yeah,
this is it. But I can feel from my website, they can schedule a free consultation. So
perfect.
there's also a training there on the brain. And bioemotional healing, you can go and read about it, but this work is in depth. It is 12 weeks. So I offer that free consultation just to make sure we're a right fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so if this is you, schedule it, right? Because I'm going to tell you right now, those moments of like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense.
Yep.
And when we don't act, the brain is like, I don't want you to change me. Let's amplify fear. Let's amplify symptoms. Let's
Right. We were just looking at it
amplify,
for
like,
you.
you can't change. Look at your history. The brain will do that, not because it hates you. It's because that's just what it knows and feels safe in now. So
Yeah.
if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is my nervous system, it, it's not just about me. I'm talking about anything. Take action, because your brain will not be the one to move you forward. It won't. It will be eventually. You can get it online, but the longer you've been stuck, it feels threatened by the conversation to change it. So take the action is what I would encourage when you feel something resonate with you. in your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of Ashleigh's information is going to be in the show notes. So if you're like, I didn't have a pen to write this down or anything like that, make sure you check the show notes because it will definitely be in there. And I encourage all of you to, if you feel led to, make sure you schedule that consult with Ashleigh. And she's got some wonderful resources on her website. It's amazing. So thank you, Ashleigh.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you everyone for listening. I will see you in the next episode. God bless.